400 meter is a chaotic test of pure foot speed and speed endurance. Its agony makes cowards of even the fastest 100 and 200 meter runners. The few maniacs that do step onto the starting line harbor an inner courage and fearlessness that epitomizes the very spirit of the Olympic Games. And from 1976 until 2024, almost 50 years, I'm going to tell you the commonalities of every single Olympic champion for both men and women. Here is the list of every Olympic champion since the Montreal Olympics in 1976, with winning times ranging for men from the world record of 43.03 set in 2016 by Wade van Niekerk to Victor Martin's 44.60 in Moscow in 1980, and from Marlady Polino's 48.17 in 2024 to Christine Urugu's 49.62 in 2008 on the women's side. The first commonality we're going to look at is the physical attributes of every single Olympic champion. The average height for the men's and women's champion is 6'2" or 188 centimeters for men, and 5'8.5" or 174 centimeters for women respectively. Holy smokes, are these guys and gals tall. The shortest 400 meter Olympic champion was Wade van Niekerk of South Africa in 2016, and Victor Markin of the USSR in 1980, coincidentally being the fastest and slowest 400 meter Olympic champion. Both of them were 6 foot tall, the tallest being Steve Gardner, who was 6'5". These tall heights confirm stride length and force production matters a lot. There are no champions under 6 feet for the men. It's the only distance we've covered so far in this series where height 100% matters. With women, they are also taller than every other distance that we've covered, but they're still not as proportionately as tall as the men. You can get away with just being slightly taller than average, as 5'5" Kathy Freeman did in 2000. So unfortunately for my short kings, you're not going to become an Olympic 400 meter champion, but feel free to prove me wrong. As for weight, we see that the men and women are much heavier than they are in the distance events, with the average weight of men being 174.4 pounds or 79.1 kilograms, and 135.6 pounds or 61.5 kilograms for women respectively. That's over 10 pounds heavier compared to the 800 for men and 5 pounds for women. And this isn't fat either. Force production is so important in the 400 that this extra weight is productive muscle. Every ounce of this additional mass is in tissue that projects you forward, and you're just light enough to powerfully glide at this weight for a full 44 seconds and not a second more. The 400 meter is the first event where you will almost never see an athlete be world class in the event above it, the 800 meter. Their 100 and 200 times matter much more. That extra weight and prolonged speed endurance is just a little too much weight to carry around and for a little too long. The 400 meter athletes are heavier and their muscles just don't have the efficiency to run much more than one lap. Jeremy Warner, as well as others, have tried to bring their 43-second point speed to the 800 and just couldn't do it. There is one exception though. Alberto Quarantina of Cuba, who not only won the 400 meter in 1976, but also set the world record for the 800 meter in the same Olympics, running 143.5 seconds. The 400-800 double is the hardest double in all of track and field, and Quarantina is an absolute animal, flying in the face of what a 400 meter is supposed to be. Imagine being able to run 44.2 seconds for the 400 and 143.5 for the 800 alone, never mind in the same event. Craziness. And this brings us to the average BMI being 20.3 for women and 22.4 for men. It's worth noting that the heaviest Olympic champion was Steve Gardner, being 207 pounds. He's the only athlete from the 400 all the way to the marathon since 1976 that was over 200 pounds. What an absolute unit. There is this misconception throughout all of track, both sprints and distances, that once you're older, you become slower, but your cardiovascular system continues to improve. And because of this, moving up in distance is sometimes the required move depending where you are in your career. But in practicality, what we found in this Analyzing 25 Olympic Champion series is that it's just not the case. I discussed in a previous video here that the average age of the 100 and 200 is around 26 years old. And this is a problem because the whole theory of moving up in the distance falls apart when you find out the average age of the 400 meter Olympic champion is 24.1 years old for men, a full 2 years younger than the 100 meter. Now, I've also discussed that the reason why the 100 meter and 200 meter Olympic champions are amongst the oldest in all of track events is more nuanced than that's the age you hit your physical peak. The bulk of the money that goes into track and field goes into the 100 meter, and that encourages athletes to run professionally for longer if you're in that event. But that's definitely not the full story for the 400 meter. Since 1976, there have been 3 Olympic champions aged 20 or younger in the 400. being Karani James, Jeremy Warner, and Steve Lewis. That's almost 25% of all men's champions. This can't be explained by itself by elite athletes not running long enough to achieve their true physical peak. There's something else there. And that's something I discussed in my last video of this series with the 800-meter runners, where there seems to be this neurological peak in your early 20s, where your central nervous system is the most responsive while under fatigue. In the 100 and 200, there's not much fatigue, but in the 400, all the way up to the 1500, there seems to be a commonality where all of their ages are between the ages of 23 and 24 years old. That's a fifth-year college student's age, or a person that just entered the workforce. That's young. Being able to hit these intense race paces in training and in the races themselves seem to be smack dab in the middle of your peak hormone years. Weight also might have something to do with it. As you get older, you get heavier, even as an athlete. Unproductive weight makes you slower. Personally, I'm much heavier than I was when I was 18 years old, and I know the same to be with most other athletes, including sprinters who are at least 5 years outside of their early 20s. But then there's another caveat about this age debate, because as much as the men's sprinters get younger as the distance goes up, we find the average age of the women's 400-meter Olympic champion is 25.8 years old. Much older than the men's, but still younger than the women's 100 and 200-meter average Olympic medalists, being over 26. So we see the decline in age as the distance moves up, but the difference is much less volatile than the men's. Revealing the 200-meter personal bests of these athletes shows that there are two kinds of 400-meter runners. The sprinter-oriented athletes, where you have the sub-20-second 200-meter males and the sub-22-second females. Athletes like LaShawn Merritt, Michael Johnson, and Stephen Gardner come to mind. And then you have the 400-meter specialists, where they're slower in the first 200-meter, and in some cases, they've never run a 200-meter in their professional career, but they excel in the second half of the race in the 400. Victor Markins, Alonzo Babers, and Quincy Hall fit right into this category, and this checks out in the literature. According to the 400 meters by Jürgen Schiffer, published in 2008, he also claims that there are two types of 400-meter runners, the speed-based runners and the endurance-based runners. The theory here calls that speed athletes should go out fast and hold on, while the endurance runners close the second 200 meters with a harder effort than the first. With some foresight in 2026, we can see that the speed-based runners might have the advantage, considering Michael Johnson and Wade Van Niekerk, the two 400-meter world record holders, have also broken 20 seconds in the 200 meters. Johnson previously had the 200-meter world record too at that point. And it's the same thing on the women's side. Shawinska in 1976 won the 400-meter Olympic gold, having won the 200-meter Olympic gold 2 Olympics before in Mexico City. She was the first woman to break 50 in the 400 and had the 200-meter world record. And then Marita Koch, the current 400-meter world record holder, tied the 200-meter world record at the time. Furthermore, Valerie Briscoe Hooks in 84 and Marie Jose Perec in 96 won both the 200 and 400, the same as Michael Johnson did in 96. It seems to show the most successful 400-meter athletes of all time are speed-based runners, though their success is not exclusive to them. Seeing Quincy Hall's last 50 meters in the last Olympics shows you every reason why. When the leaders are tying up, you're coming in clutch. Back to the overview, it seems that the golden rule is that as a 400-meter runner, you have to be able to maintain a 94% average of your top speed with a 1.2 to 1.3 times stride length to body length, meaning your stride needs to be 20 to 30% longer than you are tall. We can see this replicated in another study in 2017 called Biomechanical Report for the IAAF World Championships 2017 400 meters men's, when they evaluated the 400 meter semifinal and final performances in the 2016 Olympics and 2017 World Championships. We see all of the elite male athletes have a 1.2 to 1.3 times stride length to body, or relative mean stride length. We see both in cadence and in stride length that as the race goes on, they both decrease. Your stride length shrinks, your cadence gets slower. The first 200 is always the fastest. However, consistently with these champions, their second 100 meter is the fastest 100 within the first 200, which in turn is the fastest 100 in all a race. Coming off the first corner, these athletes are still fresh. Now they can stay more upright and push and float down the back straight. This is also when they have the longest stride length in the race. It's all downhill from there. The first 100 is started from a standstill in the blocks, making the first quarter of the race a controlled yet hard acceleration, which compromises the first 100 meter, but saves that explosive reserve energy for the next part of the race. But how much faster does your first 200 meter have to be than your second 200 meter? Here is a list of every Olympic champion's first and second 200 meter splits when they won the Olympics. And this is a graph of the differential between the first 200 and second 200 meters. Starting from Montreal in 76 to Paris in 24 for both men and women. And we see right away that the 400 is run much differently for men and women. It's either tougher for women to pace themselves in the first 200, or men's energy systems are just built to handle speed endurance at these paces much better than women. I lean towards the latter. I've always had this theory that the biggest differential for men and women in the sport of track is the events that work between 30 seconds and 4 minutes. Whether that's the men's ability to deal with acidosis better or use lactate as an energy more efficiently, I don't know, and that's another video for another time. But the fact of the matter is, in every Olympics, the respective men had closer differentials than women, with the average men's differential being 1.44 seconds and the average women's differential being 2.49 seconds. A staggering difference, over a second. Back to the paper on the men's 400 meter review, we see the author generalizes that a male athlete with a speed-based archetype can predict his 400 meter time roughly by doubling his fastest time in the 200 meter and then adding 3.5 seconds at the end of it. Now, this is a rough generalization, even acknowledged by the author, but it's a totally fair one. It's similar to the 800 meter rough prediction, where it's add 5 seconds to your 400 meter personal best and double it, and that's how fast you'll run in the 800. And for the 800 meter, it's even more broad because that formula is used for all 3 archetypes for the 800. However, according to a study from the Scientific Journal of Sports Performance called Race Development in Men's 400 meter track and field events, they concluded that 43-second 400 meter athletes, which is most Olympic champions, run the first 50 meters relatively slower to their peers and then run a stronger second 200 meters of the race, meaning that the time differential from their first and second 200 meter is tighter. And I bring up this study because when you're evaluating the men's champions since '76, that's the pattern you see, the tight differential between the first and second 200 meter compared to the slower runners. But in coaching philosophy, this study's conclusion might run contrary to what these athletes are actually taught. Clyde Hart, the coach of Michael Johnson and Jeremy Warner, who have a combined 3 Olympic golds in the 400 meter to their names, preached that there are 5 steps to run the fastest 400 meter possible. The 400 meter runner should: 1. Try to cover the first 50 meters at near top end speed. 2. Relax the actions of the upper body at 50 meters while still trying to maintain leg speed. 3. Focus their thoughts on trying to settle into the rhythm of the race and to get a feel for their competition. 4. Begin thinking about the next big effort they will make at 200 meters. And 5. Be trained and conditioned to know that at this point in the race, they will make a determined effort to increase the actions of the arms and begin to driving and lifting the knees, trying to resume more of a sprinting action. This runs directly contrary to the Scientific Journal, where the first 50 meters is supposed to be slower relative to the fast 400 meter runners' slower competitors. But it might not actually. You see, when a coach trains an athlete, their communication involves so much context and underlying structure that a coach can say one thing with a totally other desired effect. Maybe the way Warner and Johnson trained, they did so much speed endurance that to them, going out the first 50 meters extremely hard is what they needed to hear, considering the floating feeling they want to achieve later in the race. I'll give an example of this on my part. When I came back to running a few years back, my coach had me doing drills for at least 1 hour per day. He drilled into me 4 cues I had to think of while I was racing and running. Those cues were tall, aggressive, powerful, and quick. And what we were truly working on was driving my feet into the ground while keeping my hips up and straight towards the finish line. Notice how none of my cues were drive your feet into the ground or keep your hips stable and pointing forward. Yet when I thought I was being tall, aggressive, powerful, and quick, I was driving my feet into the ground and had my stable hips pointing forward, which is what my coach desired. And I'm sure if you quantified how powerful and quick I am while running, you might find that I'm not actually powerful and quick at all. But that was my coach's philosophy. Those were his rules for me, and it achieved the desired outcome. So it's not that Clyde Hart didn't know what he was talking about. It's that he had a generation of running coaching behind him and years of training with his 400 meter athletes who had their own quirks and characteristics. Anyways, I thought that would be a cool thing to share here, considering some of the discrepancies online about the 400 meter. This is why good sprint coaches and overall track coaches in general are so hard to find and to quantify. You can have 2 good coaches who verbalize their training methods totally differently, yet their athletes run similarly and share similar success. In terms of energy systems used in the 400 meter, the athlete who can produce the most power through anaerobic glycolysis while still maintaining force output as lactate builds up tends to win. Their training is largely about improving the body's ability to rapidly break down glycogen and generate ATP through glycolysis. And these Olympic champions do it better than anyone else. If you've ever done a 400 meter workout, you know how painful this kind of work is. It hurts, it sucks, and you will puke. This is is why most sprinters fear the 400. So if we were to make the perfect 400-meter Olympic champion in a laboratory, here is what they would look like. 1, they would be remarkably tall, standing a towering 6'2" if male, or a long levered 5'8.5" if female, wielding massive mechanical leverage and a stride length that stretches to 1.2 to 1.3 times their height. They are built with dense, powerful muscle tissue rather than a fragile, hyper-lean distance runner's frame. 2, their weight would be 174.4 pounds for men and 135.6 pounds for women. 3, they would be in their neurological peak and in their peak hormone years for men, being 24 years old, and in their mid to late 20s for women. 4, they would have one of 2 archetypes, being a speed-based runner or an endurance-based runner. Yet they have to have a decent 200-meter personal best if they're endurance-based. Finally, the 400-meter Olympic champion's primary superpower would be their ability to maintain velocity late into the race. While our female champion executes a wider, more volatile 2.49 second differential between their two halves, our male champions lock in a tight 1.44 second slowdown. They manage the brutal, inevitable decay of cadence and stride length better than anyone else on Earth, maintaining a staggering 94% of their top end velocity until the home stretch. And that would be our 400-meter Olympic champion. If you like this video, then you're going to love my analysis of the 800-meter, the 400 meters demented cousin, where the sprinting and distance world collide at supersonic speeds to create some of the most unique Olympic champions in all of track and field. You can find that video right in the center of the screen right here. And on that note, I'll see you guys there. Come join me.